Alright guys, welcome back to another video. So, in regards to Battlefield 6, recent events around the Battlefield series, they've come out with this idea to work on a full-fledged film based on the Battlefield series. The director will be Christopher McQuarrie, who worked on the latest installments of Mission Impossible. And apparently the project is currently in the script writing stage. Now I have no idea why any of these fools would think it would be an acceptable idea to work on an entire feature film when your latest mainline installment is actually in a really terrible spot right now. Okay, this is all signaling to me that the development team, this studio, they're all completely tone deaf. Okay, this is the type of decision making that you get with these progressives. Okay, they start to work on trivial things that don't really matter, and it just adds to the layering of problems surrounding this franchise. Okay, if you ask me, you need to focus on your mainline entry, Battlefield 6. You need to focus on fixing that damn game, providing the adequate content to sustain this game, not working on trivial bullshit 3D animations, okay, which don't need to exist. Okay, we don't need to see that. I don't want to see that. I don't think anyone is truly interested in witnessing a woke catastrophe, because let's face it, that's ultimately what this 3D rendering will become. Okay, will become a fixation of this one statement, okay, that they or a progressive, inclusive, diverse environment, okay? And it will just showcase boss bitch themes all over again. I'm expecting this to be a complete rerun of 2042, okay? Focused on personality, character identity. This shit does not belong in this franchise, okay? It's not a hero shooter. Okay, we all know this. This is partly why the game failed, why 2042 failed. We're just not interested in this agenda, okay? The other obvious problem to all of this is this heavy focus on feminization. That's part of the inclusion process. Female characters seem to be everywhere, all over the place in this game. Since BF5, actually, I've highlighted before, that's initially where the problem began, okay? We had this massive change in studio culture. That was where the problem began, okay? That's pretty much why we have all the problems we do now. Okay, that culture, what they create, that all permeates into the game, and what they're trying to do for the future of Battlefield just seems bleak in terms of creativity, innovation. Okay, the quality of content just isn't there, guys. You look at the state of Battlefield 6 now, we're talking about content which should have been in the game day one is now coming in over a year later. Okay, core features missing day one. And this isn't a problem exclusive to Battlefield and DICE. This echoes into many other games, many other franchises, Halo included. I've heard people talking about Helldivers, what state that's in. It's pretty much AAA gaming in general sucks because of this particular group, this culture that's infiltrated gaming through DEI. That's what DEI was meant to do. It's meant to spearhead the left into gaming, and essentially these people cannot create, they cannot compete with the patriarchal systems we used to have building these games. I've said this in great detail. I've made multiple videos on this before. This is my topic. I own this topic. Now again, I am expecting this to play out exactly like 2042. Whatever this cinematic feature film is supposed to be, I am expecting it to play out exactly like 2042. Okay, you look at the cinematics in that game, it's very obvious that there was a quite heavy focus on cinematics in that game. Okay, you look at the 2042 released with no campaign. Instead, they released with a focused cinematic, essentially pulling in some of the characters from Battlefield 4, and these are characters which nobody really is invested in. And again, we're guaranteed to see the same style going into BF6. There is just no energy in this style. No one is really interested in these themes. Now again, I've been covering Battlefield 6 and the state that this current game is in for quite some time now. A large reason to that is because I cannot download any games at the moment, so I'm currently stuck with this one game. Yeah, storage issues. Now I have been glued to recent events surrounding the development of Battlefield 6 in regards to its recent updates, and ultimately I'd like to call for some developer accountability, because there is just ultimately no excuses why this game is in the state it's currently in. Okay, now I'm going to follow up from the last video we just covered on. The narrative surrounding recent events seems to be shifting. Okay, now this is again conveniently done to shift any blame away from the development teams. They're pulling out every single excuse at this point. The current narrative is EA and DICE have been forced to admit that they were just following trends. They wanted to compete with COD, and they designed a game that was catered to that COD audience. That's why you didn't get all of the content which you should have got on day one. That's why they released a barebones skeleton game. And to that, I'd say this is absolute horse shit, okay? Now again, videos like mine, okay? I know that there are a few fairly critical channels in this space. Not so much as in-depth as I'm going with this right now, guys. Okay, I've exposed everything, literally, with this development team, the state of the game. We've looked in detail, the maps, the map layouts, the level of substitution that you've got with this project here is at an all-time high. Now, when I trace back to the publisher EA, the amount of support that they've put into this project, we're talking $400 million budget, 4 to 5 studios during development, and again, you have over 100 employees in each of these studios. There is massive support in the development of this game. Okay, here is all the evidence. Okay, now this narrative I want to challenge because it's completely disingenuous. Okay, yes, I understand that you want to release your game before the release of other games like COD, GTA. These are big competitors on the scene. That being said, Battlefield has always been a very small niche. It's always had its own particular group of players. It's just never going to compete with COD. You have to come to terms with that. The franchise's peak, I believe, was BF4. That was the peak in terms of content, innovation, scale, okay? The hype surrounding the game. That was truly the last Battlefield game I was really excited for. In fact, that was the last game I was truly excited for. I really wanted to get my hands on this game and just enjoy it. I just completely blown away by BF4. For its time, it was a really good game. Okay. Now again, just to compare very briefly, BF4 launched with all of the content which seems to be missing in BF6 currently, okay? And that's just not good enough. You're talking about land, air, and sea battles all on day one with all of those core features: proximity chat, server browser, custom games, the ability to host your own games. I'm not saying BF4 was a highly polished game day one. It certainly had its bugs. The maps, people had issues with the maps, but the maps grew on people as the game got significantly better over time. Technical issues like hit detection and so on were all ironed out as the final nail in the update to BF4, the final patch to completely fix BF4. I've seen people calling for BF6 needs gameplay improvements now, BF6 needs technical improvements now, such as its hit detection, get killed around corners, desync, etc. We don't iron those problems out during the development phase. Okay, they typically iron those problems out last. Reason being is because you could potentially break the game again if you implement it now. Now again, there are various competitors out there. I understand that they could have released this game earlier in order to avoid losing a certain portion of their audience to other competitors such as COD. Again, this is a bullshit argument, I believe. If the argument is now that DICE couldn't get in the content to stay in this game because they wanted to rush this game out to compete with COD, to compete with GTA, etc., and capitalize on the audience, the problem with this argument is that it ignores the state that BF5 released in. Okay, this is a problem since BF5, going back to that game, and again 2042. Okay, the live service there was just completely pathetic. BF5, again, it didn't exactly start out as a live service game. Okay, when that game released, all they said they were going to do was drop the premium pass model and release free maps going forward to support the game. Everyone heard that, they got excited for the game. They're thinking, okay, we're going to get 4 maps every 3 months and it will be exactly what we used to get, except it wasn't. Okay, what they delivered was the Tides of War live service blueprint. Okay, this essentially was a series of chapters where they'd release a bunch of different, very poorly received maps. Okay, this game just did not have the content to sustain itself. Okay, you're talking about a severe lack of content and quality compared to just going back to BF1. Okay, that again, this BF5, this game is essentially where the problem began. That was where the culture changed in Battlefield. Okay, we became a diverse and inclusive space, and that essentially was told to you by the developers themselves. Again, remember, if you don't like the game, don't buy it. We're doing this to support the cause. What exactly was the cause? It was this inclusive bullshit environment that they keep pushing, okay? This bullshit environment, this progressive workplace culture, okay, these people, they do not have the capacity to develop the content to support these games. Okay, so that's why BF5 released with less than what it should have going forward, okay? Same problems with 2042, and the problems are resurfacing with Battlefield 6. Okay, so this is pretty much core to the reason why I know that this argument is just bullshit. Yeah, it's because they just cannot provide the content. And again, they're just going to typically navigate the discussion away from the development teams into any direction they can to justify the lack of content coming into this project. I've also heard people talking about how BF1 was truly the last great title to ever be released. And again, you look at the evidence, you look at the premium pass service, the high quality content it delivered, and the teams essentially making the game. It's not hard to understand why people have that perception, because it truly was. You go back and you look at that project today, there's not many people on it, and that's because it's a World War I era game and it doesn't really have much in the sandbox compared to a modern shooter like BF4. But it truly was peak in terms of quality. You had everything there, and it was an amazing project looking back at it in retrospect. That being said, if you look at BF6 now, it's not hard to understand why you have this lack of content coming in. It's because of the culture making the project effectively. Okay, they just do not have the capacity, they do not have the output, essentially. It's just weak. That's what it is, it's weakness. I think pretty much everyone is getting sick and tired of the excuses, guys. Okay, there seems to be any direction they can throw these excuses out. It was because of COD, it's because of time, lack of resources, time and management, whatever the fuck excuses they have. It's all bullshit. Don't listen to any of that, okay? Again, it all seems to be part of the same matrix. These YouTubers, they're telling you the same story, and this neatly fits into the idea that if you're critical of the studio, they just blacklist you, okay? You've seen this happen to me. If you start talking about these issues, all of a sudden, your exposure is reduced. You're no longer getting enough views as what you used to get, and what's happening is mass censorship. This is essentially why no one can truly touch on the subject. Ultimately, looking at the game, you can tell right off the bat that there was a significant portion of the game itself missing. Now, what is that portion? The scale question, okay? The maps were terrible at launch. Maps were completely condensed, very tiny, very constipated, with shit tons of assets, okay? That's actually going to be the focus of my next video, the constipation of assets in the maps in this game. The next issue is the sandbox is completely reduced, okay? We're talking about a reduced arsenal of weapons. We're talking about a reduced vehicle selection, no commander mode, no attack boats again, okay? There is a reduced selection in armored vehicles in this game. Again, it just doesn't have the variety on offer. Narratively, we're talking about a fictional PMC introduced into this game, which they already capitalized on in 2042. There are no major factions in this game. It's just PMCs and NATO. Okay, we're not interested in that. We want massive military superpowers. There also seems to be massive censorship around this game. Okay, for example, you look at the maps based in New York, we've got the Manhattan Bridge area. There just doesn't seem to be any mass scale revolution within these games. I'm not sure if that's because they're trying to be culturally sensitive with this game, BF6. This is all pretty close to the locations of 9/11. I understand, okay? So again, there's a perception that they might have reduced the scale of destruction in this game in order not to offend people or stir up major controversies surrounding major traumatic events within New York and various other maps. Considering current events surrounding many parts of the Middle East, current wars going on right now, a lot of it is terrible. And I understand that with a current game, such as BF6, which focuses on massive militaries, you might not want to touch on these sensitive issues and certain military superpowers. Okay, BF4 was practically a playbook of future events to a certain degree. You've got massive military superpowers. Point being is that I believe this game is trying to be culturally sensitive. And that's had a massive impact on performance, scale, destruction, evolution. Yeah, various elements of this game seem suppressed in a sense. Okay, you're talking about the massive destruction of Siege of Shanghai. We have that massive tower coming down. Yeah, you couldn't have something like that on Manhattan Bridge because it's just too culturally sensitive. You're talking about the events of 9/11. Now, that being said, I do have a video I'm working on exactly on this topic. Okay, so yeah, keep tuned for that. Now, the other issue is reduced fidelity. Okay, this is another issue I have with this game. Battlefield 4, again, I'm going to compare this game to BF4 because this is supposed to be the successor to BF4. Okay, and this, in my opinion, was the series peak. BF4 introduced Levolution. Not only that, but it introduced dynamic weather and these huge set pieces. Okay, so again, you had the tower coming down on Siege of Shanghai, various massive Levolution events on these really well-designed maps. Okay, Zavod, you had the whole giant chimney coming down, this huge detonation event. Parasol Storm, you had dynamic weather. It would be daytime, and that would go into sunset until you had a massive storm, and then a huge battleship would capsize onto the island. Caspian border, again, you had the huge radar tower coming down, and that would completely destroy a portion of the map. Gulf of Oman, we had a massive sandstorm which would come in and completely blaze through the entire map, covering everything in dust and a huge fog. You couldn't see anything. Okay, and that would completely shift battle lines, disorientate players. And again, you look at the subsequent games like BF1, we had operations mode, and that capitalized on behemoths. You couldn't ignore behemoths, okay? These were massive battleships, giant zeppelins, which would tower over the battlefield. Massive air support right there. You couldn't hide in these trenches anymore, and that would force infantry to push back from rural areas back into the suburbs, back into towns, where you'd see much more dense infantry combat. Mount Grappa, again, huge map right there. Lots of aerial combat. Again, the Zeppelin was massive on this map. We also had super tanks, these massive tanks which would come out, multiple seats, multiple guns to shoot from, and this would dominate the landscape. I think this was introduced in Passchendaele, gorgeous map right there. And again, we also had a naval-focused DLC in Battlefield 1, battleships and boat combat. Okay, where you'd shoot out torpedoes from boats. It was just a really fun, interesting experience. We look at 2042, they also introduced massive game-changing elements. You had 100-player battles right there, VTOL warships, and again, the focus was on scale and fidelity. So you had massive maps again, and you had dynamic weather systems. We had a massive tornado, okay, tearing through the entire map. I've been fairly critical of 2042 in the past. I've called this game woke slop, okay, because that's essentially what this game was trying to do. It was a fashion show. We all know this. We've covered this in great detail. There was a huge diversity focus in this game, and basically pushed away most of that male demographic. That being said, it tackled the scale question. It still had scale in the game, and it still had quite a lot of fidelity in the game. Okay, you're still talking about water physics were there at launch. The game was genuinely impressive in that department. That being said, it did have its issues. Not going to focus entirely on those now. The focus is on BF6. So again, BF6 was missing pretty much most of that Battlefield DNA at launch. The scale question. Maps completely tiny at launch. That's not a Battlefield experience. Okay, that's unacceptable. Again, vehicle sandbox reduced, arsenals reduced, factions reduced, maps condensed. Content dependent on a live service system which is failing to push out the content. And again, the world, the environments are all tiny. Okay, we don't play Battlefield to play these really stupid maps. I'm sorry. I have all of the layouts right here. I was very critical of the map layouts in this game. Just not good enough, okay? Sandbox, really tiny, not good enough. That is the reason people left this game. Marketing for Battlefield 6 was really good. Very intense push for marketing right there. Heavy advertising, and then of course you had YouTubers, streamers, all promoting this game in one way or another. And this whole Battlefield is back marketing slogan pretty much spearhead this game through the scene, and really took advantage of the lack of a military aesthetic, really capitalized on that identity right there, and ultimately it started to mutate into something else. Weirdo player skins coming again from 2042, and people just fucked off. They said there's no content, there's no scale, there's no Battlefield DNA in this game. Where is it? Why was it not produced? You have all of the support. There is no excuses. So again, going back to my core argument, the topic of this video, if all of this was reduced, okay, if all of this is missing and you can see the evidence right there, you cannot use the fact that EA and DICE tried to compete with COD as an excuse, okay? That's just not an excuse. That's bullshit. The real reason this game flopped, the real reason it's in the state it's in, is because the problem is the development teams. Okay, they just don't have it. I'm sorry. They don't have the capacity. They're incompetent. That's including the men and the women. They're equally as weak as each other. This is a cultural, geopolitical issue. It's very harsh. I understand I sound like a prick, but you have to understand the wider context outside of Battlefield. Okay, all of our franchises have been affected by this one issue, and all of our franchises suck today. Okay, the problem is a cultural issue within the United States, actually. So unless we address that one issue, yeah, nothing's going to change. Everything's going to continue to get worse. So this current update surrounding Season 3, and especially my take on it, I've seen a lot of comments on my previous video talking about, oh, this is just a bad take. Not necessarily. It's just we have a very loud demographic in this franchise who are constantly pushing for hype, and it's all fake, it's all artificial. Okay, I'm not even sure these people are real at this point. This could all be bots. Okay, let's be honest. Okay, you look at these big YouTubers, Jack Frags, Westy, a lot of their content is fake hype and shilling. Okay, Jack Frags in particular, he gets a ton of views per video. You look at that one map he covered, Fort Linden and downtown. As soon as he came out with that map, he was praising that map. Rightfully so. That map answered a lot of the scale question that this Battlefield 6 had to answer. That being said, he got near enough 1 million views, and you couldn't find one full lobby on the server browser for this one map, which I find extremely fucking strange. We're talking about 64 player servers, and you couldn't find one full lobby in this game. Isn't that strange? And yet this guy just received almost near enough 1 million views on this one video. They're talking about 500,000 plus views on this one video, and we couldn't find one full 64 player lobby for this map on Portal. Again, I do believe DICE need to feature more of these Portal maps going forward for Battlefield 6, because there is a lot of unique content you'll find here, and one connection they all seem to share is the scale question. All of these maps are focused on large-scale maps. I do plan on covering some of these maps in the future, some of these Portal creations, because they are just amazing when you go back and think about it. Someone has already recreated Wake Island, and it's got its own currency system. It's got the scale there. It's connected to Fort Linden, I believe. That is just incredible. But yeah, going back to the topic of the video, there is just a lot of fake narratives surrounding this game. A lot of the blame is being shifted in multiple different directions 24/7, okay? And they're just feeding the goyim this slop at this point. That's what this is. I'm sorry, but the United States, the people there, the nation as a whole, Americans are notoriously stupid people. I'm sorry, okay? I'm gonna sound really fucking hard saying that, okay? You YouTube it, Americans just aren't the smartest, brightest people on the planet. This is where this problem comes from. Like, these YouTubers, they're literally just mind-fucking the audience at this point. To be fair, majority of the audience who've left, we can all see the scam going on. Okay, we know that there's just not enough content going in. It's just that most of the portion of this audience have left, and no one gives a shit anymore about this franchise. We've all gone back to older games, or we've just moved on to other franchises. Okay, life is just too short to waste on one particular game at this point. Battlefield just doesn't have it. The development teams were more focused on just screwing around with bullshit, okay? There is a massive DEI incentive in this development team. I've covered this hard. They have all the evidence there. That's all on their website. They're an inclusive, diverse, focused studio. Okay, that's fine. If you want to focus on women, that's great, okay? It's just don't expect me to feel sorry for you when you can't deliver the project, okay? Because you can't. The evidence is all around us. If you're going to ignore it, then you're just a fucking idiot. What can I say? We all know what demographic of people that is. Okay, but anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Yeah, just don't believe these false narratives, okay? This game didn't fail because DICE and EA wanted to compete with competitors, and they wanted to rush this game, essentially get it out the door as quick as possible, and essentially they failed to deliver the content because of that. No, that's not the reason. The reason is because they couldn't produce the content. They didn't want to produce the content. You look at what's coming from the developers' mouths. what they're saying. They're gaslighting you. They're saying they don't want to sacrifice quality, okay? Various degrees over the 8 months this game has been out. Almost a year. And we're still fucking struggling to get content into the game. I'm not buying this shit. Be real, okay? Say, okay, we're going to address the structure, this team, this development team. More layoffs ultimately aren't actually going to do anything, actually. Thinking about it now, you need an entire restructure. Go back to a patriarchal system, okay? We need more men in there, more talented developers. We need hard-working, blue-collar workers in there, okay? People who know what they're doing. Get them in this white-collar environment. There's just too many weaklings in this environment, I see. Okay, get back to the systems we had developing BF1, BF3, Bad Company 2, BF4. Those were all masculine-orientated games. I'm sure you can already tell. There wasn't much room for diversity in those games, okay? Keep all of that silly nonsense away, please. But yeah, that being said, it's quite interesting how no one can challenge my arguments. I have such a fun time basically bullying these people because there are just no excuses. You have all the time and resources. Why couldn't you produce the content? You couldn't produce the content because you can't produce the content. Oh, misogynist, sexist, racist. Get the fuck out. That's the video for today. Yeah, I'll see you in the next one.